Hello, hello, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. We got a surprise for the day from Plarium celebrating, I guess, April Fool's Day. So we have a lot of some semi-trolling but somewhat legitimate events going on to talk about. We have a fun-tastic Summon Rush as well as an uncommon tournament. So diving into the first topic, we do have the Misery Summon Rush, meaning that you can guarantee yourself an Armiger after 25 Mystery Shard summons, which is kind of a play on the traditional guaranteed events where you have a legendary for X amount of shards or whatever. But in fairness, if you were to do what I did, which was suffer through 1,000 Mystery Shards, then you could earn yourself a free, relatively speaking free, because everyone has access to Mystery Shards. You get them from the campaign, of course. So if you suffer through 1,000 Misery Shards, you can get yourself a Legendary Tome, which I think it's worth it. As long as you have a little bit of space, you can do it. It takes quite a while. It takes turning off your brain, but you get it done and you walk away focusing on the end. You walk away with a Legendary Tome. Now, it's also worth mentioning that if you were looking for the last 100 points of the Festival Titan event, that's where it resides. And for me, it didn't really matter. These were extra in excess, so it wasn't important. Also, in fairness, we do also get some energy. You get some gems, 75 gems, Mortal Soulstone, as well as an Ancient Shard. So pretty decent for the literally lowest investment possible in terms of shards, that was being Mystery Shards. Now, it's worth noting here that you can't cheat your way through with other types of shards because every single shard type is worth 1 point, meaning that it is 1000% meant for you to use Mystery Shards because it would just be a waste otherwise. Now, if anyone was curious how I specifically do that, I freed up like 50-ish spaces, and then I just kept cranking through and feeding them away. So when I do this, I typically feed all of the commons and uncommons to whoever I happen to be like my most recent 6-star, which in this case happens to be, well, I guess they're de facto 6-star when they pop out. But I was feeding my Galathier here, all of the commons and uncommons to get him to level 52, which is where I will start to get him masteries when I have the time to do so. And after that, if I maxed him out, which I did in this case, then I would either go on to other champions who need to be leveled up and are 6-star, like the other 2 mythicals I have, or in this case, what I ended up doing was champions who are going to be in the vault. So legendaries, I make sure to feed them. Well, normally I just let them level up in the sparring pit to get them to 50, but if I can speed that up a little bit with commons and uncommons, I'll do that. So you can see Fina here is almost level 50, but majority of that was just the food that I put into her. And then I think also I got Septimus, who should be somewhere in here. Yeah, Septimus here. I got him all the way out to level 50 as well. So again, just feeding it to champions. Essentially, any champion who's already in development, I'm skipping the runs of campaign that I would run them through by feeding them the commons and uncommons, and then anyone I already had leveling up here in the sparring pit. If I didn't have any more legendaries to get to 50, then I would repeat the same process, but just for the epics that I put in the sparring pit. And in the end game, I typically use all duplicate epics who are not used for some purpose as food and chickens, whatever. So, but I do make sure to keep a copy at least of every single epic, every unique epic that I have, just in case I need them for some future content. So champions like this are the ones that I do plan on keeping. I just make sure to get the free levels from getting them to 40. And so these are examples of champions who are the unique one. And then if they are a duplicate, I would pull them out of the vault. So I guess we can just take a look at that. If I were to pull a duplicate, for example, then I would come here, find the one I'd already leveled up to 40 via the sparring pit, take them out, use them as a future 5-star chicken, and then repeat the process with the level 1s down here and just put them in the sparring pit, get them back up to 40. If I pull a duplicate, the process repeats. So it's not necessarily a guide, but that is my strategy for using the sparring pit, as well as where I put all of the food champions when I have to pull a bunch of mystery shards. The second topic for the day is the challenge tournament, which we honestly haven't had a challenge tournament in a long time, and I'm not really happy with this iteration of it because it is uncommons only in Spider, which is more difficult than it seems because most people would say, most content creators, most players know that it's really not worth it to level most or many uncommons into the end game. And so I wouldn't recommend it, not even for the niche situation that this happens to fall under, because this is like the first time that I've ever seen it, at least in the past, 5 years of raid. So I still think it's not worth it, generally speaking, to level uncommons. But nonetheless, if you do happen to have some, this would be the time to use them. And we'll talk about what my team is. I guess we can just hop over there right now. So my air quotes team is just whoever I had available, which in my case, I'm running stage 11 just because they're positive affinity, so more chances of weak hits, so we get less poisons if the minions happen to take turns. So we have trusty old Armiger, and then I had a shield guard who I happen to have at level 50. He used to be like a Faction Wars temp DPS slot who used to have gear on. He's been in the reserve vault for a very long time, and he was just there until I got someone who could actually be a real DPS for Faction Wars, and I was hell-bent on not 6-starring him just because I didn't think it would be value added, and that came to fruition with, I think, Hoskrul, I think, took his spot. So defense-based as well, and a decent epic nuker. But yeah, this team is extremely simple. We have Armiger doing his normal things, turn meter control on the A1, enemy max HP hit on the A2, and Shield Guard is kind of our spider killing bot, so to speak. So he has an AoE on the A2, which does decent damage, and it gives him a lot of turn meter when he crits, and so he can essentially get an extra turn right afterward. And so effectively that ability is on a 2-turn cooldown. So he's our spiderling killer, and then he also has decreased speed on the A1, and then Armiger is our enemy max HP damage dealer. So let's go ahead and see this team in action. No aura, of course, because most uncommons, I think there are a handful of uncommons that have an aura, but majority of them do not. So I don't necessarily have to talk over the entirety of the fight because you'll see pretty much the cycle once they get going here. So there's the super boost turn meter, so Shield Guard effectively gets an extra turn just because there's so many spiderlings to hit. And one cool thing about Shield Guard is that he does have a passive where he'll just cleanse one debuff off of him. So if he does get poisons, he kind of can, he'll cleanse one of them off before he takes a turn, so he doesn't take the tick of the poison damage. So it's kind of helpful. But yeah, rinse and repeat. This is not going to be a speed run by any means. The spider will take turns. Maybe if I had Armiger and Relentless or something like that, then he would be able to kind of keep the turn meter down, but we're not really trying to do that. So also worth noting here that if I had Shield Guard at level 60 or 6-starred, we'll show the gear on the champions later on. But if I had him 6-starred, he'd probably be able to one-shot all the minions every time. But considering that he's only 5-star and he's an uncommon, so the base stats are pretty low, he's not able to do it. So stage 11 was the best, or the highest stage I think I could reasonably get away with doing this on. I know that there is like stage 10 has a relatively speaking a high rate of uncommon 5-star gear, which can be lucrative, but unfortunately that stage is magic affinity, and so you would just get a significant amount of weak hits. And at least with these two alone, it didn't work for me, just because again, you just hit a weak hit a ton. You're not actually killing spiderlings, the queen heals more, etc., and it just kind of falls apart from there. So if I had built up more uncommons, maybe that would have worked, but again, like I said earlier, building a bunch of uncommons is not really a recommendation from me, especially, you know, free-to-play players. We have a limited amount of resources, so I would not waste your resources on that. However, we will talk about some other uncommons that might be able to be of use in this particular instance, who you might be able to get away with having them at level 40, because this is such a low stage of spider that as long as you're consistently killing the minions or tanking it in some way, you can just continue to cycle through your abilities until you get to the end of the fight. So should have one more hit or two from Armiger. I guess Shield Guard might be the finisher here once he gets to start in there. Boom. Okay, so yeah, 2 minutes, very slow. Again, this is not a speed run by any means. We're only using 2 champions, and like I said, I wasn't going to go out of my way to, even if the other uncommons I'm going to mention, I wasn't going to go out of my way to build them just for this for a couple of days tournaments. There's no Void Shard or anything else that's like super enticing in the tournament. There is the chance at Relentless, of course, if you do happen to win your group. And honestly, if you can make a team as basic as this that can do a handful of runs and your group is absolutely dead because no one wants to do this, then hey, you can take top spot, get yourself some Relentless. I think my group, the top person was like already above 400, so they had some solution for it. So I'm not going to try and fight for the top spot, but for my particular instance, I'm at least I have nothing else to do for the next couple of days in terms of energy. I guess I could be doing Minotaur, in fairness, but my plan for the next few days is just to run this team slow and steady and get somewhere around, I think, 440 points for the dust, because why not? I don't really run Sand Devil that much outside of like the Marius missions at this point, and so I would just take some extra dust. It's a couple of rerolls, why not? So as mentioned, let's take a look at the gear on this champion. I do have Shield Guard in a lifesteal set. I do want him to be able to heal himself up when he takes damage, because he's the primary target usually for the spiderlings, just because he is weaker. He has much lower HP than Armiger, but primarily again because he's 6-star versus 5-star. So Immortal just kind of fit because of the gloves that I have on him. They're just a crit rate with speed, some accuracy. little bit of flat defense, and so I just finished him out with an immortal set. Why not? A little bit more HP, a little bit more healing. But yeah, you can see the gear here, level 15. He's not in like the best gear of anything. I didn't really put him in great gear, but I don't use lifesteal that much in the end game, so all of the lifesteal is basically free for the taking. So total stats, again, considering here that he is a 5-star, he's not a 6-star, 23,000 on the HP, 2,300 on the defense, 188 on the speed, full crit rate, and then 214 on the crit damage, and then 200-ish accuracy, which is enough to make sure that he can actually land the decreased speed weak version on the A1. Notably, uncommons cannot have blessing, so that's not something to discuss. And masteries, as you might suspect, I did not really do. I did a little bit, like a couple of runs, just to get him, a little bit extra crit rate, a little bit of extra crit damage, and then a little bit of extra defense. So I stopped there, didn't really focus too much on that. Next up, Armiger, who has been demoted from my Scarab King team, replaced by Newt. But I just kind of have him in random pieces of gear. So speed and perception, nothing amazing, but nonetheless still a very, very solid champion. On the HP, very low, 29,000. On the defense, 3,200 on the speed, full crit rate, and 221 on the crit damage, and then 350 accuracy, just in case I need him for something in the future. So nothing amazing on his gear, but nonetheless, that is my Armiger. For the masteries, he does have his done, as opposed to Shield Guard, because I did used to use Armiger in a lot of teams over the years. And yeah, coming down the offense tree, ending on War Master, that's more of an end game thing when you start to get to beyond stage 20 in the dungeons, because you hit the enemy max HP cap, and so extra crit damage doesn't really do anything if you're hitting the cap. So the extra damage from War Master makes more sense. But if you're kind of progressing through and you're still using Armiger in your Spider team or your Fire Knight team or whatever, I think Flawless Execution is probably the way to go, just because he's a very difficult champion to build with good amount of speed, good amount of accuracy, good amount of crit damage, and full crit rate. Other notable masteries are Methodical, because he's going to use a lot of A1s, low steel, extra stats, Evil Eye, extra turn meter control on his first turn at least. And then you can see here I didn't really finish out the T5s on the other side because it doesn't place any debuffs. And if for some wild reason you were not convinced by my earlier spiel about not building uncommons and you wanted to know about who else you could use to do some sort of low level stage or potentially higher stage of the Spider Dungeon, so there's a couple of notable ones that could be of use. Number one being Elfguard, who is also Spirit Infinity, so she would work on stage 11, or I guess any Force stage in the future. And her most potent thing is that she has the ability to decrease the enemy's current turn meter by 50% on a 2-turn cooldown when booked. So much more powerful than Armiger's A1, but it is on a 2-turn cooldown, so bear that in mind. But nonetheless, a very, very useful ability. And next one is somewhat of an old school champion. Way back in the day, used to be like a great spider tank, because you could run her in like Retaliation, or rather in Lifesteal with Retribution, because she has an AoE on the A1 with a defense multiplier. She's defense based, kind of like Armiger, kind of like Shield Guard in the same vein. So she could do a decent amount of damage. It's not going to be crazy, right? She's not going to be a super nuker, but just being able to constantly use an AoE on the A1 can deal some damage over time, similar to what Shield Guard can do. And so it can just be a very effective way to help kill and clear the minions if you want to use that strategy. And then the last one to mention is from the Lizardmen. Used to be like an option, like really like 3 to 4 years ago, used to be an option for a campaign farmer, because he has an AoE on the A1 and an AoE on the A2, and this is a double hitter. And so basically, again, similar to Zephyr Sniper, similar to Shield Guard, just a lot of AoE potential, so he can just help kill and clear all the spiderlings when they pop up. And so you can prevent or minimize the amount of healing that the main spider is going to do if you can continuously kill all the minions. So in summary, my recommendation is definitely suffer through the 1000 mystery shards if you can. If you have the capacity to do so, you can get yourself a free legendary tome just for doing that, and I think that is most certainly worth it, and I definitely went through it myself. And if you have some of the uncommons laying around, you want to get them to 5-star, I wouldn't recommend taking them to 6-star, but if you want to get them to 4-star to 5-star, they can definitely do the work. You can see that my Shield Guard at 5-star was enough for what I need, and this is such a temporary thing that I'm willing to accept a 2-minute run, especially now that we have permanent super raids, so we can cut the number of runs in half, which is going to be helpful for a relatively speaking slow run. So yeah, that's going to do it for the free-to-play review of the April Fool's Day events. Let me know in the comment section down below if you are going to be participating in the Misery Summon Rush as well as the Uncommon Spider Tournament. And let me know what your composition is going to be. Are there any more uncommons that you might be able to use that I missed because I looked through them all? Let me know that and more in the comment section down below. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you did did enjoy the video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.